With Jiren never even getting close to showing his full capabilities, there were still many questions unanswered about Jiren's powers, and the biggest one of all was this: how had Jiren not been erased on the spot for floating? Wasn't that considered a form of flight? The thing was, now was the time to panic. However, he refused to show it. How could a defender of the universe be the one showing fear? Whatever it took, all of the Pride Troopers would have to find a way to stay calm about this. But that didn't change the fact that in only a matter of days, they might be erased, along with every other living creature in Universe 11. Thankfully, there was one thing that gave him hope. It was time to call their best fighter. Toppo knew that his friend Jiren was off somewhere meditating, and from that first moment that you saw him floating in a dark void of nothing, you knew there was something strange about Jiren. Somehow, he was different than the others, and this difference would slowly show itself throughout the Tournament of Power, eventually leading to what you are about to learn, which is a better understanding of how Jiren's power works. By being a Pride Trooper alone, Jiren was able to prove that he fought for justice and cared for the people of his universe. Added to his seemingly unlimited source of power, Toppo saw Jiren as the perfect person to ask for help. But he also knew that Jiren's compassion would also be an obstacle. He couldn't leave Universe 11 unprotected while the Pride Troopers were away. But when Toppo explained that the Super Dragon Balls would grant a wish to the winner of the tournament, Jiren's decision to stay suddenly changed. However, his situation got complicated after arriving to the world of Void. As the Grand Priest repeated the rules for the tournament, Jiren started feeling an emotion he wasn't very used to. This place had been controlled so that certain skills, such as flying, couldn't be used. The only exception were those fighters who had wings. This was to ensure that fighters wouldn't be able to avoid elimination once pushed off the stage. And for the same reason, floating was also not allowed. But why would Jiren feel afraid of not being allowed to fly or float? Jiren shook the feeling off. Nothing would stop him from winning, both for his universe and for his wish. What he needed to focus on was himself. Jiren needed to meditate. But first, he observed the other teams to find the strongest competitor. That person would be Jiren's job to handle. But as soon as someone challenged him, his teammates would jump in to protect him. Hadn't Toppo told Goku after their fight that his friend Jiren was even stronger than him? Why did someone that strong need others to protect him? But even more confusing was this: Jiren kept closing his eyes. Did that have something to do with the meditation he was doing the first time you ever saw him? However, Jiren couldn't just stand there forever. When Kale went berserk, Jiren could tell that she had no control over her power. She threw Goku across the stage. His body landed behind Jiren and his teammates, and Kale's out-of-control self started to follow her opponent. To make sure Kale wouldn't harm his teammates in her path of destruction, Jiren finally decided to fight. With one hand, he sent her body flying, but soon, Jiren was found with his eyes closed again. Why did he keep doing this? If it did have something to do with his meditation, then wouldn't he have simply meditated before coming to the tournament? That would make the most logical sense. However, a hint was soon coming. Dispo had failed to fight off the sneaky Majikayo. Before Toppo could step in to help, Jiren had decided to once again take action and make it clear that he truly was a powerful being. Without even a single touch, Majikayo had been eliminated. Where was all this power coming from? His battle with Goku would soon give away part of the secret Jiren was hiding. Jiren had already been observing Goku's different abilities, and he was proving to be stronger than Jiren had originally thought. Jiren suddenly heard his name called out. He focused his thoughts to his inner mind. His universe's god of destruction said the time was right. With the amount of time that had passed since the start of the tournament, he was sure Jiren had had the time to build up enough power to defeat Goku. This was the reason you kept seeing Jiren closing his eyes since the start of the tournament. It wasn't the same as normal meditation, but simply keeping his eyes shut allowed him to partially close out his surroundings and focus on charging the power he needed. Jiren agreed with his god of destruction, and he instantly went after Goku. At first, the fight was going exactly as Jiren had believed it would. Not being able to fully meditate had left him with less energy than he would normally like to fight with, but this opponent was turning out to be an easy elimination. Even after pushing Goku's limits and forcing him to use his trump card, Jiren had still found himself on top. Goku was gone for good, but then everything changed. Goku not only had survived, but he was back with a huge power upgrade. Jiren saw Goku quickly coming closer. He looked to his right. Toppo hadn't seen it yet. Jiren looked to his left. Even Dispo, known for his speed, hadn't noticed that Goku had even moved. Jiren was all alone. He managed to move out of the way just in time. Jiren wondered what had happened to Goku, and what weighed even heavier on his mind was a worrisome thought. Only doing a partial meditation by closing his eyes hadn't given Jiren enough energy to fight this new new, higher level of power that Goku had managed to gain for much longer. The mark Goku had just managed to leave on Jiren's cheek was proof enough. How would he defeat Goku before his time was up? Jiren's speed was slowing down. The battery of his power was running low. But that's when Jiren's luck took a turn in his favor. What was this heat he had just felt pass by him? He took a closer look at the seemingly new opponent across from him. Goku was letting out an extreme amount of heat. This was Jiren's key to success in this moment of worry. With the heat escaping Goku's body this quickly, Jiren felt confident about two things. First, there was no way his energy wouldn't last longer than Goku's. Jiren felt like he had been saved. How humiliating it would have been to be defeated by this weakling, only because he hadn't charged his power to its max before the start of this fight. And second, Goku had no idea how to control this power, but Jiren did. In fact, you didn't know it, but you were given a hint long ago that Jiren knew how to control this energy that was now leaking out of Goku as heat. This strange yet clever clue was given to you the very first time you ever heard his name, Jiren. This name comes from the name Renji, which translates to range, more specifically a gas range, or better known as a gas stove. As strange as it may seem, there's a very good reason that they use this as inspiration for Jiren's name and powers. A gas stove is started by a spark. By waiting and letting the heat from a flame burn, the coil will get hotter and hotter until it's finally ready to use. And in the same way, Jiren uses his meditation to build up his power. But thankfully, he had learned to control this heat, unlike his opponent Goku. And for this reason, Goku was caught. And before ending this battle, Jiren gave Goku a secret to the power that he was quickly losing. This heat, that is your limit. If Goku wanted to ever have a real chance against him, Jiren knew this control would have to be learned. With his main opponent down, he had to build his energy back up. And the only way to do this was to enter into full meditation. However, there was a problem. The fear Jiren had started to feel earlier when the Grand Priest had repeated the rules came back to him. Both flying and floating were not allowed. Jiren worried that his meditation wouldn't be understood, but Jiren had no other choice. He knew for sure that Goku was done for good, but Jiren also realized it would be foolish to assume that he wouldn't be needed again for the entire rest of the tournament. And if that unlikely occurrence actually appeared, then he would need his powers to be recharged. Jiren was forced to depend on a small hope that the Grand Priest would understand that this meditation wasn't the same as floating. His body lifted in the air. Red, fiery aura surrounded him. Like turning on a stove, he had sparked the flame. All he had to do was wait for his power to heat up long enough to be ready to use. The Grand Priest was surely watching. Jiren knew his fate would be decided in the coming moments. Because if the Grand Priest thought that Jiren was floating during meditation, then he knew he would be eliminated on the spot, or worse, completely erased. Yet there he sat, peacefully meditating, his body appearing to be floating. Why did the Grand Priest not seem to care? You didn't realize it, but the answer was right in front of you. Did you notice the floating rocks? However, Jiren had no idea the true capabilities of a Saiyan's powers. By the hands of an unlikely volunteer, Goku had been given a second chance. And after finding another opponent strong enough to push his limits to the max again, Goku had done what Jiren had thought to be impossible. The surprising feeling of two increasing powers outside of his world of void was starting to break Jiren's concentration. But when one of those powers suddenly surged, with a force even greater than in his fight against an Ultra Instinct Goku, Jiren was left with a very serious choice that needed to be decided quickly. Should he continue heating up his powers, or should he try to deal with the amount that he had already brought back? The second increasing power he had been feeling all of a sudden started surging as well. Jiren's decision became obvious. He turned the stove of his meditation off. The rocks fell as his feet touched the ground again. Thankfully, it seemed the Grand Priest had understood Jiren had not been floating. But now he saw Goku, charging up his own power. Maybe Saiyans were more interesting than he had thought. But thankfully, Goku was focused on the fight that he was in. This gave Jiren the opportunity to observe Goku's powers from afar, like he had at the beginning of the tournament. The time it had taken Goku to regain enough energy to pass his previous level of power with Ultra Instinct by this much was extremely impressive and very worrisome to Jiren. Goku was once again causing Jiren trouble. But by the end of this fight, Jiren was faced with another choice. Goku had drained his energy again, and by the Grand Priest not eliminating Jiren for what seemed like floating during meditation, he was given the opportunity to charge his energy further. Would he use this time to heat up his powers more before Goku made another comeback? Or would he try to attack Goku while he was out of energy? With Jiren never even getting close to showing his full capabilities, there were still many questions unanswered about Jiren's powers. And the biggest one of all was this: how had Jiren not been erased on the spot for floating? Wasn't that considered a form of flight? The thing was, Jiren was actually doing something that you've seen many times before, and that reason is why the Grand Priest had not called out Jiren's meditative floating. Remember the floating rocks pointed out to you earlier. Think about where else you've seen this happen. Goku has broken the ground and caused it to lift around him many times before as well. These were the times that he was powering up. Strangely, this can also be applied to the same inspiration they used for Jiren's character, a stove. But this time, think about how an electric stove works as compared to a gas one. There is no actual flame to provide heat for the coils. The longer time that electricity enters the stove, the hotter and more ready it gets to being usable. In fact, it's similar to charging up your phone. The longer time it's hooked up to electricity, the fuller its battery gets. And the longer Goku's body powers up, the fuller his battery of energy gets. This charging up of energy causes rocks to lift and float around his body. Now apply the same concept to Jiren's meditation, and you'll see why the Grand Priest didn't eliminate him. He wasn't floating or flying at all. His body simply was acting the same as the rocks around him. Entering into full meditation is Jiren's way of powering up. This is how he charges the battery of his power. Jiren is left to consider the two choices that he has. By now, he's gathered enough energy to defeat a weakened Goku. However, Jiren's sense of justice will prevent him from making such a low blow. He will return to his full meditation and charge his power's battery to 100%. In this way, Jiren knows he'll be able to use everything he has in his rematch versus Goku. And in the stands, they're still trying to understand the strange heat from Goku's new form. It didn't make sense that the angels and gods, who were so familiar with Ultra Instinct, had taken such a long time to realize that this is what Goku had achieved in his fight with Jiren. The reason they didn't realize it at first was because